1 minute ago, Garth Brooks is breaking the news and it's bad. Garth Brooks is one of the few artists in American music history that even people who never followed country music know exactly who he is. He walked away from all of it voluntarily at the height of his fame, came back on his own terms, and proved he could still fill stadiums well into his 50s. So how does a man like Garth Brooks find himself, at 63, stuck in a multi-state legal battle that has now dragged into its second year, watching a brand new bar struggle to shake off a disastrous opening week, losing a meaningful chunk of his core fan base over a beer, and preparing to tour again while openly admitting the pressure is enormous? This isn't the story of one bad moment. This is several things collapsing at the same time. And the details are worse than most people realize. The lawsuit nobody saw coming and the legal war that keeps escalating. As of March 2026, the legal battle between Garth Brooks and his former hair and makeup stylist, identified only as Jane Roe, has entered a complex jurisdictional phase that shows no sign of quick resolution. Kaufman Law, what began in the fall of 2024 as a bombshell set of allegations, has evolved into a grinding strategic war over which court gets to decide the case, and every new procedural development brings another news cycle. The lawsuit was filed by a former hairdresser who identified herself only as Jane Roe, alleging that the country music superstar raped and sexually assaulted her on multiple occasions, including once while the two were in Los Angeles for a performance. Whiskey Riff. She had worked with his wife Trisha Yearwood since 1999 and began working for Brooks personally in 2017. According to her filings, he used her financial vulnerability as leverage, and the alleged pattern of behavior ran from 2019 through 2024. What made everything significantly messier was what Brooks did before she filed anything publicly. He preemptively filed his own lawsuit in Mississippi under the name John Doe, arguing she was attempting to extort him for millions of dollars. He compared the experience to having a loaded gun pointed at his face. When she filed in California, his team moved to have that case dismissed and pushed everything toward Mississippi, a state without the anti-SLAPP protections that California offers, which would have made it far harder for her to fight back publicly. A California federal judge recently declined to dismiss the sexual assault lawsuit against Brooks but simultaneously placed the California proceedings on hold, deferring to the first filed lawsuit in Mississippi. Kaufman Law. The accuser has also filed an appeal in her attempt to remain anonymous after a Mississippi judge denied her request for a protective order, following Brooks' decision to name her publicly in an amended court filing. Whiskey Riff. Her legal team responded sharply, saying Brooks revealed his true self by publicly naming a rape victim, calling it an act done out of spite with no legal justification, and vowing to pursue maximum sanctions against him. Rolling Stone. Sources say Brooks is confident the case will eventually be resolved in his favor, but acknowledges that the longer it drags on, the harder it is to fully move forward. National Enquirer. That is an understatement. A case like this doesn't weigh quietly in the background. Every procedural filing, every appeal, every sanctions motion becomes another headline. And for someone whose entire public brand was built on being decent and trustworthy, each headline is its own form of damage, regardless of what the courts ultimately decide. What he built before any of this. To understand the full weight of what is happening to Garth Brooks right now, you need to understand what he actually constructed over 3 decades. He was born in 1962 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and arrived in Nashville in 1987 after a failed first attempt. What separated him wasn't just his voice or his songwriting, it was the way he performed. While most country acts of that era kept things relatively contained, Brooks brought something closer to a rock arena experience. He leapt across stages, smashed guitars, used pyrotechnics, and generated energy that audiences had only seen at rock concerts. His 1991 album Ropin' the Wind debuted at #1 simultaneously on both the Billboard Country Chart and the all-genre Billboard 200, a first in music history. His Central Park concert in 1997 drew an estimated 750,000 to 1 million people, one of the largest concert audiences in American history. He is the only artist in music history to have released 9 albums certified diamond by the Recording Industry Association of America, surpassing the previous record of 6 held by the Beatles. Total worldwide album sales exceed 170 million, making him by SoundScan Records the best-selling solo artist in American music history. His net worth as of 2024 was estimated at around $400 million. That is the platform now under strain. The bar that generated its own controversy the week it opened. While the lawsuit was detonating in late 2024, a completely separate situation had already created its own public relations damage earlier that year. On March 7, 2024, Brooks and Trisha Yearwood officially opened Friends in Low Places Bar and Honky Tonk on Broadway in Nashville, a 54,000 square foot, 4-floor venue billed as the largest honky tonk on the Strip. Brooks had spent 3 years building it, talked about it constantly in interviews, and described wanting the Chick-fil-A of honky tonks, a place where people felt safe, welcomed, and where classic country from George Strait and Merle Haggard played in the background. The reviews that came back within the first 2 weeks told a sharply different story. Customers reported paying $37 for 2 drinks. An undisclosed entertainment surcharge appeared on bills without being posted anywhere. Visible. Some customers couldn't pay with cash, which struck many as particularly incongruous for a venue billing itself as a honky-tonk. And the loudest complaint of all, multiple reviewers reported the bar wasn't playing country music. Reviewers described hearing Flo Rida, Whitney Houston covers, and songs by the Cranberries. One reviewer wrote that the place had no country vibe whatsoever and looked more like a club in New York City than a honky-tonk in Tennessee. For a man who had specifically and repeatedly promised classic country, that gap landed as a targeted hit to his credibility. The Bud Light decision that split his audience before any of this. What a lot of people covering the current situation tend to skip over is that Garth Brooks had already lost a significant portion of his core audience before the bar even opened, and well over a year before the lawsuit became public. In June 2023, at a Billboard Country Live event in Nashville, Brooks mentioned that his upcoming bar would serve every brand of beer, including Bud Light, which was in the middle of a massive consumer boycott from conservative fans following the brand's promotional partnership with a transgender influencer. Other country artists had made very public statements against serving it. Kid Rock had filmed himself shooting cases of it with a rifle. Brooks went the opposite direction. He confirmed he would serve it and said that if people wanted to come to his bar, they were welcome, but they needed to come with love. The internet immediately ran with that comment, and the backlash from a large portion of his fan base was swift. People posted videos throwing out his albums. Forum posts declared lifetime fan relationships over. A politician from New York publicly announced he was deleting every Brooks song from his music collection. Brooks doubled down, calling diversity and inclusiveness core to who he was, and saying he wasn't changing his position. For people who agreed with him, it was a rare act of principle. For the portion of his audience that had been with him since the early 90s and held deeply conservative values, it felt like a betrayal. And that fracture was already in place before the lawsuit arrived, before the bar opened, and before any of the other troubles of 2024 began. Where things stand right now, and why the pressure isn't letting up. By early 2026, Garth Brooks was not hiding. He has been performing, he appeared at major events, and he has made unmistakably public plans for the year ahead. He teased new music and a potential tour for 2026, writing on social media, "New year, new music, new tour." It's all on the table in 2026. Taste of Country. He is set to headline Summerfest 2026 in Milwaukee on June 16 and 17, his first appearance at the festival, with a second date added due to demand. Garth Brooks. He is also set to headline BST Hyde Park in London on June 27, his first UK performance in nearly 30 years. Garth Brooks. But sources close to him say Brooks is anxious heading back out on the road, noting that the longer the break between tours, the worse the nerves get, and that he worries the audience may have been driven away by all the noise in his personal life, even as he is told that support is still there. National Enquirer. That anxiety is understandable. The legal situation remains genuinely unresolved. The central question is still one of jurisdiction, whether the case proceeds in California, with its robust protections for the accuser, or in Mississippi, where Brooks may hold a procedural advantage. Kaufman law. The discovery process in a federal civil case is extensive and typically generates its own rounds of public filings and media coverage even before a trial date is set. Every procedural development becomes another news cycle. That pattern is unlikely to stop soon. His financial foundation remains substantial. A lawsuit, even one this serious, does not immediately threaten $400 million built over decades of record-breaking touring and royalties. What it threatens is something harder to rebuild, the specific identity he spent 30 years constructing. Brooks had always been positioned in the public mind not just as a successful entertainer but as a good man, someone whose charitable work was genuine, someone who walked away from fame to raise his daughters and came back on his own terms. The lawsuit directly attacks that identity at its foundation, regardless of how it ultimately resolves in court. What is certain is that the accumulation of everything that happened between June of 2023 and early 2026 represents the most sustained and damaging period of public difficulty in his entire career. A political controversy that cost him a meaningful portion of his conservative fan base. A bar opening that generated immediate headlines about broken promises. A federal lawsuit containing allegations that, pending resolution, will follow every public mention of his name for the foreseeable future. And now a return to touring carrying the weight of every unanswered question still circulating. None of these things individually would be enough to significantly alter the legacy of someone with his record. Together, arriving in the compressed timeframe they did, they constitute something different. And how he navigates what comes next will define the final chapter of a story that was, for most of its length, one of the most remarkable in American music. What are your thoughts about Garth Brooks? Share with us in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Click on the next video that pops up on your screen, you never know what you'll discover next.